I share the shock that Speaker Boehner expressed. My hope is that the Speaker is going to want to get to the bottom of it. I mean, if these reports are true, it's a shocking breach between two very close allies.
Peter Welch on MSNBC there, accusations made the Israelis eavesdropping on the nuclear negotiations with Iran, using that information to help make their case with Congress. Welcome into America's Forum for this Wednesday with Miranda Kahn. I'm J.D. Hayworth.
Yeah, this is another report out today and highlighted on our Newsmax.com website. Says that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may be softening his stance on the deal with Tehran.
So, with the relationship continuing its downward spiral, what is next and what effect might it have in the 2016 elections here in the U.S.? For more on all these developing stories, we're very pleased to be joined once again by Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz. Alan, the author of Terror Tunnels, the case for Israel's just war against Hamas. And of course, he's also a blogger for Newsmax.com. And Alan, we appreciate you Skyping in this morning. Before we get to the spying accusations, your take on the report of the Prime Minister perhaps softening his stance on the proposed nuclear deal with Iran.
Well, he already softened it when he spoke in front of Congress. He said, there's the deal we like, and then there's the deal that we, the Saudis, the Jordanians, the Egyptians could live with. And basically what he's doing is now saying this is the deal we could live with. But it would require at the very least that before the deal is over, before the sunset provision begins to operate, that Iran give up its claim that it is entitled to destroy the nation state of the Jewish people, Israel, that it's entitled to export terrorism around the world, and it's entitled to meddle in the affairs of Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, and other surrounding countries. So the softening occurred quite some time ago. There is Netanyahu's maximalist position, which is a strong one, and then there's the position that he's prepared to accept. That's been his position right through. It's likewise with the two-state solution. There's Israel's maximalist position, as there is the Palestinian maximalist position, and then there's the position that he'd be prepared to live with. So instead of throwing accusations, let's understand that Netanyahu is a reasonable negotiator when it comes to both Iran and the two-state solution.
But Alan, we do want to get your reaction to those accusations of spying made by the Obama administration. What are your thoughts?
Well, I sure hope Israel and the United States are both spying on Iran. If they're not doing their job. There's only one way to make sure that Iran doesn't develop nuclear weapons, and that's to spy on them, which we've been doing certainly since 1979, and I'm sure before that. Iran is also trying to spy on us. Of course, the United States regularly spies on Israel. Spy versus spy has been traditional since the beginning of time. When you exclude Israel from the negotiations, as the United States and Iran have done, although they are the primary victims of an Iranian nuclear weapon, when you totally exclude them from the negotiations and include China and Germany, which have no real direct interest in these negotiations, then you're encouraging Israel to find out whatever it can in whatever means it can. And as far as using a Congress, that's part of our separation of powers and our checks and balances. When Winston Churchill wanted the United States to go to war with Nazi Germany, he did everything in his power to try to persuade both the president and Congress to support him. Indeed, he worked vigorously for the election of Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1940 because he knew that the victory of an isolationist would hurt his government. We applaud Churchill for doing that, and we should applaud Netanyahu for putting the interests of his country first and for trying to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons, which would be bad not only for Israel, but for the United States and for American allies in the region.
Alan, about a minute 15 remains in this segment. The administration reacted to the accusations as well. Let's take a listen to what State Department spokesperson Jan Psaki had to say, then we'll get your reaction to her reaction.
It's an absurd notion that Congress would have to rely on any foreign government to gain insight into the nuclear negotiations with Iran. We've briefed Congress on the nuclear talks as much or perhaps more than any other issue since October of 2013. Point being, they received quite a bit of information directly from the United States and senior United States officials.
30 seconds for your response to that, Alan.
And the way they worried. Why are they worried? If Congress is getting all the information they need from the administration, then obviously if Israel is providing information, it's redundant. The reason the administration is worried is because they're not telling the truth about this. They are withholding information from Congress. For example, they withheld the information about the 10-year sunset provision. And so Israel is absolutely entitled, if they have information which they got from public sources or other intelligence sources that contradict what the administration is telling Congress, they are absolutely obliged to tell Congress the
And
truth.
on that note, Alan, we will be back with you right after this timeout.
The language used by the Chief of Staff of the President of the United States is exactly what Hamas uses. Wake up and change your policies before you set the whole world on fire. Please watch your language. You're making everything worse. And now you've added fuel to the fire.
South Carolina Republican Lindsey Graham on the floor of the United States Senate on Monday as we welcome you back into America's Forum alongside Miranda Kahn, J.D. Hayworth here.
Yeah, Senator Graham was reacting to inflammatory comments made by White House Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough, who said, among other things, when referring to Israel, an occupation that has lasted more than 50 years must end.
These comments came after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he no longer supported a two-state solution in the closing days prior to the Israeli elections, and that angered the Obama administration. Against that backdrop, let's continue our conversation now with Harvard Law professor and Newsmax.com blogger Alan Dershowitz. Alan, Senator Graham went straight to the floor and engaged the White House Chief of Staff. He was clearly angry.
He should be. The White House, both the president and his chief of staff, are acting like petulant children rather than statesmen. A statesman takes two statements, one by Netanyahu saying he opposes the two-state solution, and then the second one saying no, he doesn't. And always a statesman will focus on the positive and say, thank you so much for clarifying. Let's move forward. Let's emphasize what you said most recently. But both the White House and the president himself have said, no, we're going to focus on the statement we don't like. We're going to focus on the negative statement. That's just silly and bad statesmanship, and it shows personal pique and petulance rather than a willingness to work together with an American ally. So I think what Senator Graham said was absolutely deserved. The front page of the New York Times, the major headline, says that the petulance of the White House, and particularly Obama, have turned in favor of Netanyahu and Israel. Even Israel's staunchest enemies now think that the Obama administration, and particularly President Obama, is overplaying his hand, is acting immaturely, is not producing anything that would lead in the right direction. So the president is wrong in this regard, and Republicans, I'm a liberal Democrat, but Republicans are correct in pointing that out and holding the president's feet to the fire.
So, Alan, you mentioned that you're a liberal Democrat. Do you think this will have any impact on the 2016 elections when it comes to Jewish voters?
It depends. First of all, it's not only Jewish voters, it's any pro-Israel voters, which are a majority of the American population, and could make the difference, of course, in states like Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and many other contested states. I think the answer is clearly yes. And I think the big loser in this whole thing, potentially, is Hillary Rodham Clinton. She hasn't said, as far as I know, a word about the Iran deal. She's not said much about the two-state solution. But remember, Barack Obama is not running for re-election, and Hillary Clinton is running for president, and she has to make sure she holds on both to the donor base and to the voter base. That's so important, namely the pro-Israel constituency, which is very widespread in the United States and goes well beyond the small number of actual Jews who vote. In fact, the Jewish community is probably a little bit more split on this issue than the pro-Israel community in general. So the Democrats have a real problem that they will have to deal with before the 2016 election.
And speaking of that 2016 election for president, in the 2 minutes that remain, Alan, we understand Ted Cruz was a student of yours at Harvard. Now he has stepped out and made it official. Your thoughts on Ted Cruz getting into the presidential race?
Well, he's very smart. He was a very, very good student, and his Republican opponents would make a mistake if they underestimated him. And so he will be a strong candidate. He will push all the other candidates to the right because of his views, which are fairly ideologically hard right on many issues. particularly social issues, he will attract some pro-Israel voters, clearly, because he has strong positive views toward Israel. So he is a force to be reckoned with, but we have to wait and see Jeb Bush, Rubio, some of the other strong candidates, and we'll see how they fare against Ted Cruz. But Ted Cruz is first in. That doesn't surprise me. He's a very aggressive, very smart, and generally very principled person, so he has to be taken very seriously.
As far as Republicans go, 15 seconds, would you endorse him as the Republican nominee?
I don't endorse Republicans. I'm a Democrat. I'm going to vote Democrat unless the Democratic candidate has issues on foreign policy which are incompatible with my own. I think any voter should keep an open mind today. Certainly pro-Israel voters have to keep an open mind. They have to persuade us that the interests that we care about, that is American foreign policy, what's good for America, what's good for peace, what's good for the world, what's good for Israel, we have to be persuaded as to which party and which candidate best supports those pro-American values.
All right, we'll see. Open-minded Democrat Alan Dershowitz, author of Terror Tunnels, The Case for Israel's Just War Against Hamas. As always, we thank you, Alan, for your time here on America's Forum. And it's time for our poll question. Now, we heard Ted Cruz speak on Monday at Liberty University and make his big announcement. Do you like his message? Is Ted Cruz your candidate for 2016? Vote in our poll, newsmax.com/poll. We're coming back.